Last week, we talked about bust adjustments on a t-shirt pattern. Now this week, I'd like to address how to handle back contour shaping. Age and posture can take a toll on the body and sometimes can result in more rounded shoulders and back. Now, in order to achieve a good and comfortable fit in your garments, you'll likely need to make a pattern adjustment to accommodate this body shape. So today I'll cover the upper back and mid back contour shape adjustments. I'm Alexandra Morgan from In-House Patterns and In-House Patterns Studio. I teach experienced sewers and budding pattern makers how to make and adjust patterns for fit and style. Let's start with the upper back contour shape adjustment. Now, the upper back contour shaping is always the extra length that you need at center back right here up near your neckline. Now, in general, what this usually means is your back neck drop is hanging too low and you've got quite a forward neck. So basically, your neck and your upper back is being exposed here. So what I've done here is drawn in a few slash lines. And now I know that there are a lot of lines on here, but I want you to focus on the red ones. So the first line that I have drawn is perpendicular to center back, and it's just somewhere below the base of the neck. Now, if you want to draw it right along the base of the neckline or the seam line, that is fine with me, but I want to demonstrate how the amount of change that you make at this point is going to change your back neck width. Now, if your change is quite small, it will change it very, very little. But if it is large, you'll find that your back neckline length will grow. So the first line I drew was a perpendicular line from center back, and it's just going straight into and near the armhole. What I've done is pivoted it up to the intersection between the shoulder line and the back armhole seam line. The next line I've drawn is a perpendicular line from the line I've just drawn, or parallel to center back, up to the point here that intersects the shoulder line and the back neckline seam. Now I have added another vertical line that is perpendicular from my original slash line that is just about an inch in from the center back line and goes straight up. This is where you're going to actually end up having to kind of slash and spread in order to add the length that you need for your back neckline. Now, in some cases, you may not need this extra back neckline length, but in general, when you have a more rounded upper back area at the very base of your neckline, you do need a wider back neck width. So it's something that you can experiment with. Perhaps you'll experiment with combining this upper back contour shaping and the mid back contour shaping, which I'm going to show you in a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is slash along these lines, and I'm going to create pivot points that are going to be at this point here and this point here. Okay, so I am just inserting some paper here at the underneath so that I have some room to increase my back length so that I can get my back neckline to sit higher on the body. So I'm just going to secure this bottom area in place. And then what I'm going to do is decide exactly how much I want to add to my center back length in order to bring my neckline up. So I'm going to use the example of 1/2 of an inch. Now, be careful about doing too much here. Be sort of conservative to start with, because if you also have to do a mid-back contour, that is also going to be adding to the length that is along your center back spine area. So I'm going to just use the example of a 1/2 inch. So all I've done is drawn a parallel line to my slash line that is a 1/2 inch above the original slash line. And you're going to see here that I am going to place my pattern, making sure that it's lying flat, and I'm going to shift it until this section of the slash line is lying perfectly along that 1/2 inch marking where I've indicated how much I want to add. Now you're going to see when I do this that the center back actually pulls away from the vertical center back of the lower portion. And that's simply because this area of the pattern is overlapping slightly in order to keep the shoulder line length the same. So what I'm going to do is once I get that all parallel, so this whole section here and here should be parallel to each other, I'm going to secure that in place, and you'll see this section is overlapping. I'm just going to secure all of that in place. And then what I'm going to do is take this third slash line, I guess it's the fourth slash line sort of, that I had here, and I'm just going to snip that apart and then shift it over so that the center backs meet. Now by all means you could just draw a line over and continue the center back up. That's absolutely possible to do, but I like to do it this way because I feel like it completes the entire alteration. So you can see here that it does add more back neck width. So this is something that will really help you if you have a really prominent bone in the back of your neckline at the very top of your spine. It's likely that you will need this extra length to go over that sort of contour that you have right at the center of your spine. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that your shoulder line now will be a little bit skewed. So if you want to go back and redraw that shoulder line into the correct position, what you're going to do is draw it in from the center back line. So you're going to be connecting this point on the shoulder and drawing a perpendicular line from center back that intersects with that point. And you're going to find that the shoulder line will move into a slightly different position because your neckline base is a bit higher, and you can actually find the position a little bit more easily. So this is no longer the shoulder width line, this is the shoulder width. And you will probably also likely find that there is measurement added to this, which is also a good thing, because if you have a rounded back, it's likely there is a longer length from shoulder to shoulder than if you had a more standard kind of straighter back. So that's something to just consider. Always go back and complete your pattern work. So completing the pattern work also means putting in the seam and cut lines, making sure that all that works together. So now that we've completed our pattern work for this upper back area, we've altered the shoulder line length position here, and we've got this opening here at center back. When you're working with a knit, you can actually eliminate this as ease inside the back neckline if you find that you don't need this. So what you can do is take the neckband that you have for your t-shirt and just indicate this as ease. We learned last week about how you can distribute ease in the pattern without actually stitching darts. If you keep your neckband length exactly as it is with no changes, and you can easily take up this little bit of extra length that you have in the back neckline if you find that you don't need it. Now let's move on to the mid-back contour shaping, which I'll show you next. Okay, so to get started on the mid-back contour shaping alteration, what we're going to do is draw an initial slash line that is around the across back line. Now it's probably most important that you find the area that is the roundest or the most prominent part of your back and the roundness in your back. I usually like to make the adjustment above the across back line, but it does depend on where you're most predominantly curved. Then I like to find a point that is about 2/3 of the way from center back to the back armhole seam line. This usually indicates in and around that shoulder blade area. Now, if it's not there for you, by all means, you can make a marking on your sample and actually indicate where that is on your pattern. Then the next point I'll find is the midpoint between the shoulder line length. So basically I've got two slash lines, one that goes perpendicular to center back and one that goes from the center of the shoulder line to about 2/3 of the way from center back between these 2 points. And then what I'm going to do is slash along those lines, and I'm going to create a pivot point right here at this area here. Now, of course, we're just going to put some extra paper underneath this little pattern here, and then we're going to be able to shift our pattern out like this. So you're going to see, I'll just secure this paper beneath to begin with. because this part's going to stay the same. And then what I'm going to do is shift it up. So let's assume that we need another 1/2 inch in terms of our roundness in our back. Now this is going to vary based on how much roundness you have in your back, but I'm just going to use this 1/2 inch as an example. So I'm just drawing another alteration line that is a 1/2 inch away from my slash line. And then what I'm going to do is pivot this pattern piece until I get all of that lined up. I want this section of the pattern to be completely parallel to my original slash line. And you're going to see here when this happens that there is a slight difference in length here. So what I can do then is just snip through this pivot point to be able to allow me to shift this whole section over so it meets the center back line again. Now by all means you can slash through again and shift this section, but since it's such a small little amount, doing it here at the pivot point is fine. Again, you do want to make sure that these two lines are parallel. And then of course, if you've released this pivot point, you want to make sure that you align it again to that 1/2 inch. So there is going to be a 1/2 inch gap between this point here and the original slash line. So you can see there's a tiny little gap there. Now this clearly is going to create dart volume here at your back shoulder line. And this is where you're going to use again that concept of easing. So you're going to create a shoulder line that is longer than your front shoulder line. So hopefully your front shoulder line is going to hold this easing amount here, and this will sort of dissipate in the knit garment. But what you're going to do is blend through these lines. You want to keep a slight curve here by all means. And I like to just use my ruler, but I can freehand here as well. And just kind of blend a nice curve there. And again, you want to mark where your cut line is as well. Again, blending in those lines. This becomes ease in your back shoulder line, which then gets secured by your shorter front shoulder line. Now, if you remember last week with the bust adjustment, I mentioned that you can actually put ease into your front shoulder line. So this is where you have to keep track of the alterations you've made. And what I would suggest you do if you have ease in both the front and the back shoulder line like this, what I would suggest you do is measure the old or the original seam line length and create what I call a stay, which you can basically cut your stabilizer the right length so that you know exactly how much you need to ease in on each the front and the back. So you can cut another piece of knit that is the right length of your shoulder line and then stitch that along your shoulder line to stabilize it and hold the ease that you need there to be. Now you may also find that you need to go back and true up or smooth out any corners that may have happened here at any pivot points. So if you do need to smooth out your pattern piece, by all means do that. It's going to be okay to have a little bit of extra length across this back area because of course with the roundness in your back, you generally have to add more width and more length to accommodate that roundness that you have. Okay, so there we have the upper back and the mid back contour shaping. Now when we did this mid-back contour shaping, it's very likely that your shoulder line once again will slightly be disturbed. So what I would recommend here, since this is going to just be easing, I would just use your French curve and I would just kind of round out this particular line if you're going to use it as a reference because it will actually remain slightly curved because basically you've added flare into this part. So in other words, you're easing in, this becomes a little bit of a curved line. Don't be too concerned about that, but you can use that measurement as a guide to the shoulder width that you're trying to achieve based on the roundness of your back. If you'd like to learn about stretch fabric pattern making, I invite you to look into my online course, The Custom Stretch Knit Bodice. You'll learn how to draft a basic t-shirt using your own body measurements. I'll leave a link for you on this page. Now, if you're not interested in drafting your own t-shirt, I do have a pattern that you can use. It's called the Jenny T, and you can find it at inhousepatterns.com. I hope you enjoyed this Fitting Knits video series. If you have comments and questions, please use the comment section below this post. Have a great week. I'll chat with you soon. Bye for now.